Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, staring at the vast emptiness of space displayed on the panoramic screens. The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds, endless, beautiful, and cold. For 3 weeks, he and his crew had drifted through this unexplored sector, cataloging gas giants, scanning barren rocks, and logging empty voids. It was the kind of work that looked grand in the history books but felt tedious in the moment. Most days were like this, quiet, uneventful, safe. Jake hated safe. He leaned against the railing, his hands tightening around the worn steel. Exploration was in his blood, but the silence gnawed at him. Every captain dreamed of a discovery that would change humanity's place in the galaxy. But so far, the only thing he'd discovered was that boredom could kill faster than vacuum. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Amy Johnson, his sensor officer. She sat at her station, her dark eyes narrowed at the readings in front of her. "I'm picking up something strange." Her tone sliced through the stillness. Not bored, not routine, excited. Jake straightened. "Strange how?" Amy's fingers danced across her console. Numbers filled the air between them, projected as floating holograms. Energy signatures, dozens of them, maybe more, but they're wrong. Commander Ben Rodriguez, Jake's second-in-command, walked over from the navigation pit. Always cautious, always skeptical, Ben peered at the data. Could be a trap. The Galactic Consortium's been testing new tech lately. They might want to see how we react to unknowns. Jake frowned. He didn't like the sound of that. The Consortium, humanity's uneasy neighbor, ruler of half the known galaxy, rarely did anything without a reason. But these readings felt different, unsteady, weak, broken. "Johnson," Jake said, "distance." 6 hours at current speed. She hesitated. "Captain, I think I'm also detecting distress signals mixed in, very faint, almost buried under the noise, but they're there." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her science station, her white lab coat crumpled from long shifts. She had spent years studying alien cultures, and her instincts were razor-sharp. "If those are distress signals, we have a duty to investigate. Whatever species they are, they're asking for help." Ben shook his head. "Or they want us to think they need help. Could be pirates, could be a consortium trick, could be something worse." Jake listened, weighing their words. As captain, his first duty was protecting his crew. But humanity had always been known, for better or worse, for sticking its neck out when someone else was in trouble. Some species called humans fools, others called them heroes. Jake wasn't sure which was true. Maybe both. "Johnson," he ordered, "can you give us visuals?" Amy adjusted her controls. The bridge fell into hushed silence as the forward screen flickered, resolved, then filled with an image that made the entire crew lean forward in disbelief. Ships, dozens, no, hundreds, drifting together in a loose formation. But not sleek warships, not consortium dreadnoughts, not human freighters. These ships looked broken, hulls patched with jagged repairs, engines sputtering, whole sections missing, replaced by crude scaffolding and desperate welding. They moved together like wounded animals huddling for warmth. "My God," Dr. Carter whispered, "look at them." Some ships were long and thin, like vessels built by aquatic races. Others were circular and burrowed, the kind favored by subterranean species. A few shimmered with angular geometry, the hallmark of insectoid civilizations. A fleet of survivors, a fleet of desperation. "This is a refugee convoy," Lisa said softly. "Has to be. Look at how they're positioned, stronger ships shielding the weaker ones in the center. Look at those cargo pods, they're carrying everything they own." Ben's jaw tightened. Refugees from what, and why are they heading toward our space? Before anyone could answer, alarms chirped from Johnson's station. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission, weak, but I can boost it." Jake nodded. "Put it through." The bridge filled with static, crackling with alien tones, clicks, whistles, guttural pulses. The translator struggled, groaned, then managed to stitch the words together. "Unknown vessel, this is Hive Speaker Zakh of the Kathura Refugee Fleet. We mean no harm. We seek only passage to safe space. Our people are dying. Our ships are failing. Please respond." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Another voice followed, softer, fluid, like water moving over stones. "This is Elder Morton of the Zelani people. We add our voice to the Kathura plea. We have been cast out by those who should have protected us. If you are people of peace, we beg your aid." Then came a third voice, harsh, mechanical, broken by interference. "Chief Engineer Jexar of the Vorthach Fleet. Our engines fail. Our children suffer. We have traveled far from home. If you have compassion, help us." Silence pressed down on the bridge. The translator rendered their desperation with raw clarity. Tens of thousands of voices compressed into 3 pleas for mercy. Ben was the first to break the silence. "Captain, if we help them, we risk the consortium's wrath. If these people are running from the consortium, they'll brand us traitors for aiding them." Lisa countered sharply. "If we abandon them, we're no better than the consortium itself." Jake stared at the trembling fleet. These weren't soldiers. These were families, entire civilizations in exile. His gut told him what the right thing was, the hard thing. "Johnson," Jake said, "open a channel." Amy's hands flew across her console. She nodded. "You're live, Captain." Jake drew a steadying breath, then spoke clearly, his voice resonant across the stars. "Refugee fleet, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel New Horizon. We hear your distress calls. We will help in any way we can, but first, we need to know who exiled you and why." The reply came quickly, as though they had been waiting for anyone to ask. Hive speaker Zach H. answered, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "We are 3 peoples who defied the Galactic Consortium. The K-Thura would not give our crystal gardens to feed their war machine. The Zelani would not fight in their wars. The Vorthach would not surrender our inventions. For this, they named us enemies of peace. They took our worlds. They hunted us. We fled." Elder Morton added, voice thick with sorrow, "We are the forgotten, cast out into the void." Jexar's mechanical voice rasped like grinding gears. "We have over 100,000 souls aboard these vessels. We cannot survive much longer." 100,000. The number hit Jake like a physical blow. 100,000 lives waiting on his next words. Ben whispered urgently at his side. "Captain, if we bring them into human space, the consortium will retaliate. Sanctions, maybe war. Are we ready for that?" Jake looked at the screen, at the ruined ships, at the faint lights of life clinging to shattered hulls. He thought of human history, ships packed with refugees fleeing wars, seeking safe harbors. The faces had changed, but the story was the same. Humanity had always been judged not by its strength, but by its compassion. His decision crystallized. "Johnson," Jake said, "send a message to Colonial Command. Tell them we've encountered a refugee fleet in distress. Request immediate authorization to escort them into human space." Amy nodded and tapped her console. "Message sent, but it'll take hours to get a response." Jake stood tall, his jaw set. "Then we won't wait. Begin transferring medical supplies and emergency rations. Dr. Carter, prep your team for alien physiology. Rodriguez, get engineering crews ready for field repairs." Ben hesitated, and if Colonial Command says no? Jake's gaze never wavered from the refugee fleet. "Then we'll deal with that problem when it comes, but I won't let them die out here." The crew snapped into motion. Cargo bays filled with medkits and food. Shuttle teams prepped for emergency landings. Engineers packed tools and equipment they barely understood, but hoped would keep alien life support systems running a little longer. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the hum of activity. Jake sat in his chair, watching the stars, waiting for Colonial Command's reply, waiting for the moment when hope might turn to betrayal. Finally, Johnson's console beeped. "Captain, priority response from Earth, marked direct from President Martinez herself." Jake's heart hammered as he opened the encrypted message. He scanned the words, then stopped, stunned. "What is it, Captain?" Ben asked. Jake looked up, his face pale, then breaking into something like pride. He turned to the bridge crew. "It says, bring them home." The words lit the bridge like fire. Relief, joy, fear, hope. Jake stood, his voice steady as he spoke into the comm. "Hive speaker Zach H. Elder Morton, Chief Engineer Jexar, I bring word from the human government. You are welcome in human space. We will escort you to safety." For a moment, silence. Then sounds filled the comms, hums, songs, mechanical rhythms, alien expressions of gratitude that blended into something haunting and beautiful, the sound of hope itself. But hope never lived long without enemies. "Captain," Johnson shouted suddenly, her face pale. "Consortium ships inbound, 5 of them fast approach." The bridge went silent. Jake gripped the railing, staring at the tactical display as the sleek, deadly icons appeared on the screen. The consortium was coming. The New Horizons bridge was bathed in crimson as the alert sirens wailed. 5 consortium ships tore across the void like blades of silver and blue. Their engines burned with power far beyond anything humanity had ever produced. On the tactical display, the refugee fleet appeared as scattered, broken embers, fragile, drifting, and vulnerable. Between them and the consortium warship stood only one human vessel, Jake's New Horizon. "Shields up," Jake ordered, his voice firm. "Weapons on standby, but do not fire unless they fire first." Lieutenant Johnson's hands trembled slightly as she complied. "Shields at full strength. Weapons armed, though against those ships, sir, our chances." "Don't think about the odds," Jake said, though his own stomach churned. "Think about the people counting on us." The lead consortium vessel slowed, breaking formation with the precision of a predator circling its prey. Its hull gleamed, covered in markings of authority, the insignia of the diplomatic corps. A channel opened automatically, overriding standard protocols. The voice that filled the bridge was sharp, smooth, and cold. "Human vessel, this is Ambassador Verisal of the Galactic Consortium. You will halt all actions immediately. Prepare to be boarded." Jake stepped forward, his jaw set. "Ambassador, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Horizon. We are in human space, escorting refugees under human law. You have no authority here." A pause, then the ambassador's voice came again, silken with disdain. "You misunderstand. The beings you call refugees are criminals exiled for endangering galactic peace. They are fugitives. You are aiding them. That is a violation of consortium directives." Ben Rodriguez muttered from Jake's side, just loud enough for the captain to hear. "They always dress tyranny in polite words." Jake ignored him, addressing the ambassador directly. "If they are criminals, then prove it. Show me the evidence. Show me the trials, the verdicts, the testimony of their supposed victims." Silence. The pause stretched long enough for the crew to exchange glances. Finally, Verisal spoke again. "The evidence is classified. You must trust the justice of the consortium." Jake allowed himself the faintest smile. "I trust what I can see, Ambassador. And what I see are broken ships filled with starving families. I see children who have lost their homes. I see beings who chose freedom over fear. That does not look like crime to me." The ambassador's voice hardened. "You tread on dangerous ground, Captain. Turn over the fugitives, or there will be consequences." Jake met the cold gaze of the consortium vessel on his screen and felt the weight of 100,000 lives pressing on his shoulders. "Then, I suggest you take that up with my government. Until then, they are under our protection." The channel cut abruptly. The consortium ships shifted formation, surrounding the refugee fleet at a distance, close enough to intimidate, far enough to avoid open conflict. "Captain," Ben whispered urgently, "if they open fire, we're done. They've got weapons that could tear us apart in seconds." "I know," Jake replied. His heart pounded, but he forced calm into his voice. "That's why we don't blink. They're testing us. If we show weakness, those refugees are gone." For 2 days, the standoff dragged on. The New Horizons crew worked around the clock, ferrying supplies to the refugees, patching their crippled ships, and sharing what little comfort they could. Dr. Carter spent her nights on alien vessels, stitching wounds with human medkits and soothing frightened children with gentle words they barely understood. The consortium ships shadowed their every move, silent and watchful. Sometimes they powered weapons, then powered them down again like predators baring teeth. It was psychological warfare. But the refugees began to sing. At first, it was a faint hum that vibrated through the comm channels. The K-Thura hive emitted low harmonics that resonated in the bones. The Zelani added liquid tones like flowing rivers. The Vorthach struck rhythmic metallic beats, hammer against hull. Slowly, the sounds merged into something larger, a chorus that filled the void with defiance and hope. Even hardened human engineers stopped their work to listen, eyes damp with emotion. Jake stood on his bridge, hearing the music ripple through the stars, and he understood. These people were refusing to die quietly. And humanity would not abandon them. The message from Colonial Command came faster than expected. A priority channel lit up, carrying the weary but firm face of President Helen Martinez. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice steady, though Jake could see the strain behind her eyes. "Your report has reached us. We have deliberated, and after much debate, we have chosen to act." Jake held his breath. Around him, the crew leaned closer. You are to escort the refugees into human space. 3 colonies have volunteered to receive them: Green Valley for the Kathura, Aquatica for the Zelani, Iron Ridge for the Vorthach. Humanity will provide safe haven. That is our decision. The bridge erupted into cheers. Amy Johnson whooped aloud, Ben Rodriguez slumped in relief, and even Dr. Carter allowed herself a smile of triumph. But Jake's eyes never left the president's image. Madam President, the consortium will not accept this quietly. They're already here watching. Martinez's expression hardened. Let them watch. Humanity must be judged not by its fear but by its compassion. Bring them home, Captain, whatever the cost. The channel cut. The bridge was silent again, not with fear this time, but with resolve. Jake turned to his crew. You heard the order, plot a course for Green Valley, signal the refugee fleet, tell them they're going home. Amy's voice trembled with excitement as she relayed the message. Moments later, the comms lit up with a response. Hive speaker Zach H's voice buzzed with emotion. Captain Morrison, the Hive sings your name. Humanity will be remembered in our stories until the end of time. Elder Morton's liquid voice added, the ocean accepts all rivers. Today, humanity becomes the ocean. Chief Engineer Jexar's mechanical growl softened. The Vorthach build things to endure. This friendship will be the strongest creation we have ever made. Jake swallowed hard. For the first time in weeks, hope bloomed in his chest. The convoy moved slowly toward human space, the new horizon guiding them like a shepherd. Behind them, the consortium ships followed, silent and menacing. On the 3rd day, Lieutenant Johnson's console blared. Captain, consortium reinforcements, 20 more ships inbound. The tactical display filled with hostile markers. A wall of warships, sleek and deadly, cutting off the route ahead. The comm channel opened again, unbidden. Ambassador Vereisel's voice dripped with triumph. Captain Morrison, this is your final warning. Surrender the fugitives or witness their destruction. You cannot defy the consortium and survive. Jake stared at the screen, his crew's anxious eyes on him. He thought of the refugees, their patched ships, their fragile hope. He thought of humanity's reputation, reckless, stubborn, compassionate. He thought of history books and the moments that defined civilizations. Then he spoke. Ambassador, humanity doesn't scare that easily. Vereisel's eyes narrowed. Then you've chosen war. On the tactical display, the consortium fleet powered weapons in perfect unison. The blackness of space lit with lines of deadly fire preparing to launch. Jake's hands tightened on the railing. His voice was low but steady. All ships brace for contact. The first salvo blazed toward them, a storm of light that could tear worlds apart. The first consortium salvo cut through space like a wall of fire. Lances of searing plasma streaked toward the convoy, filling the New Horizons bridge with flashing red warnings. Impact in 5 seconds, Johnson shouted, her voice breaking. Jake gritted his teeth. Evasive pattern Delta 3, brace for shields. The New Horizon rolled sharply, her engines straining. The ship's shields flared white as the consortium barrage slammed into them. Metal screamed. Systems groaned. The deck shuddered beneath their feet. Shields at 60%, Johnson called. That was just the first volley. Another storm of plasma fire followed, but this time it wasn't aimed at them. Jake's eyes widened in horror. The consortium had shifted their fire toward the refugee fleet. The broken, patched vessels had no real defenses. Their shields flickered like candle flames against a hurricane. One Zelani transport, already crippled, caught a full blast. Its hull split apart in a spray of molten fragments. The lights aboard winked out. Thousands of lives extinguished in an instant. A stunned silence filled the bridge. No, Dr. Carter whispered, her face pale. On the comms, Elder Morton's voice trembled. They killed them, entire families, children. Jake slammed his fist against the railing. His fury burned away hesitation. Target the lead consortium ship. Fire all batteries. Ben Rodriguez spun toward him. Captain, our weapons won't scratch them. Then let's remind them we're not afraid, Jake roared. The New Horizon unleashed her arsenal. Missiles streaked across the void. Railguns spat slugs of tungsten. Laser batteries slashed at consortium shields. Against superior warships, the attacks were pinpricks. But pinpricks that drew blood. One of the smaller consortium frigates reeled under the barrage, its shields flickering for a moment. The ambassador's cold voice filled the comms. "Pathetic, you cannot stop us." Jake snapped back. "No, but you'll know damn well we tried." The battle raged. Consortium fire hammered the New Horizons' shields, driving them down to 30%. Consoles sparked. Smoke filled the bridge. Engineers shouted damage reports over the comms. Forward shield emitters failing. Starboard reactor overheating. "We can't take another hit." Jake barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Divert auxiliary power to shields. Keep firing, don't let them think we're broken." The crew obeyed with grim determination. Humanity's first stand against the consortium would not be remembered as surrender. But Jake knew the truth. They couldn't win, not like this. Then something unexpected. "Captain," Johnson cried, "I'm detecting power surges in the refugee fleet, massive ones." Jake spun toward her. "Explain." Her eyes were wide, disbelief written across her face. "The Zelani ships, those aren't cargo pods, they're energy cores. Old, inefficient, but, Captain, they're overloading them." On the screen, a crippled Zelani freighter turned toward the oncoming consortium formation. Its engines blazed at full power, far beyond safety limits. Plasma leaked like blood. Elder Morton's voice came across the comms, calm despite the chaos. "We are not as helpless as they believe. For the ocean to survive, sometimes a river must be sacrificed." "Morton, don't," Jake began, but the channel cut. The freighter accelerated, its hull shuddering apart as it rammed straight into a consortium cruiser. The collision detonated both ships in a blinding fireball. The shockwave rattled the New Horizon. When the light faded, the consortium cruiser was gone, obliterated. The bridge crew stared in stunned silence. Ben whispered, They just rammed them, blew themselves apart." Jake's chest ached. One sacrifice, thousands dead. But they had proven something vital: the consortium could bleed. The consortium fleet recoiled in momentary shock. Then their anger redoubled. Plasma cannons roared again, tearing into refugee ships like wolves ripping into lambs. "Captain," Dr. Carter cried, "we can't let them slaughter the fleet. We need cover, something, anything." Jake's mind raced. They couldn't fight head-on, but maybe. "Rodriguez," he snapped, "order the refugee ships to scatter and fall behind us. Form them into clusters by species, strongest ships shielding the weak. Johnson, find us a course with asteroid cover or nebula interference, anything that messes with targeting systems." Amy's fingers flew. "Nearest option, Perseid dust belt, dense particle clouds, 4 hours away at full burn." "Then that's where we go," Jake ordered. "Signal the fleet, hold formation, we'll buy them every second we can." Engines screamed as the convoy limped toward the Perseid belt. Behind them, consortium warships pursued like predators driving prey into a trap. For hours, the chase raged. The New Horizon danced between salvos, shields flickering, hull groaning. Refugee ships strained to keep up, engines sputtering with exhaustion. Inside the ship, corridors were chaos, medics running with stretchers, engineers welding ruptured bulkheads, smoke choking the air. Yet through it all, the crew held. Ordinary humans, mechanics, navigators, scientists, facing down the most feared power in the galaxy with nothing but grit and stubbornness. When fatigue threatened, the refugee song rose again. The harmonics of the Cathura mixed with the Zelani flow and the Vorthach rhythm. It filled the comms, echoing through human corridors, reminding everyone why they fought. Even in despair, the sound carried hope. They reached the Perseid dust belt just as another barrage tore through a Cathura vessel. Its hull cracked open, spilling atmosphere and bodies into the void. "Enough," Jake snapped. "Prepare the ion projectors, target the dust clouds." Johnson hesitated. "Captain, that'll create a storm of static interference. We'll be blind too." "So will they," Jake said grimly. "Do it." The New Horizon fired bursts of ion energy into the nearest cloud. The dust particles lit up like a thunderstorm, a swirling haze of static and lightning. Sensors scrambled. Targeting systems screamed with errors. The refugee fleet vanished into the chaos. So did the consortium. The stars disappeared, replaced by a maelstrom of glowing dust and blinding flashes. Ships darted in and out of visibility like ghosts. Weapons fire lit the clouds in bursts of white and orange. It was chaos, but chaos favored the desperate. Deep inside the dust storm, Jake's crew held their breath as consortium signals crackled, confused and fragmented. Enemy vessels lost in interference. Shields fluctuating. Targets not locking. Ben grinned despite himself. It's working, they can't track us. Jake allowed himself a tight smile. Then let's give them a taste of what it feels like to be hunted. The New Horizon fired from the storm, striking a consortium frigate blind. The shot pierced its weakened shields, tearing a hole in its hull. Refugee ships added what fire they could, makeshift cannons, jury-rigged railguns, even mining lasers pressed into service. The consortium frigate exploded. Cheers erupted on the bridge. For the first time, they weren't just running, they were fighting back. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. "Captain," Johnson said, her face pale, "long-range scans just broke through the interference. More ships inbound, a lot more. Consortium reinforcements, 50 vessels minimum." The bridge fell silent. Ben swore under his breath. "They'll crush us. Dust storm or not, we can't fight 50 warships." Jake stared at the tactical screen. 50 ships. Enough to wipe out not just the refugees, but his crew, his ship, his people's future. For a heartbeat, despair gnawed at him. Then he looked around the bridge, at Johnson's steady determination, at Carter's fierce compassion, at Rodriguez's loyal courage. He thought of the songs echoing through the fleet, of children waiting in darkened ships for a miracle. And he made his choice. "Signal the refugee fleet," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Tell them to prepare to scatter deeper into the belt. We'll draw the consortium to us." Ben's eyes widened. "Captain, that's suicide." Jake met his gaze without flinching. "It's survival. Someone has to hold the line." As the crew scrambled to obey, the comms suddenly flared with a new signal. "Unidentified vessels approaching," Johnson reported. "Not consortium, not refugees either." Jake's heart skipped. "Who?" Johnson's hands shook. "I don't know. They're transponders, they're alien, multiple species. And Captain, there are dozens of them." The channel crackled, then a new voice filled the bridge. It was calm, strong, and utterly unfamiliar. "Human vessel, this is Captain Zick Sander of the Zyorian Liberation Force. We heard your transmission. Resistance is possible. We come to fight by your side." Jake's eyes widened in shock as more voices followed. Strange, alien, defiant. "This is Commander Thelvian of the Free Mothers. War Leader Karak of the Drachmani Exiles. Captain Maleric of the Independent Traders Alliance." One by one, ships appeared on the tactical display, emerging from hyperspace into the storm. Ships from species humanity had never met, all flying into battle. The bridge crew stared in disbelief. Ben whispered, "My God, the galaxy's answering." Jake gripped the railing, a fierce grin breaking across his face. For the first time since the battle began, hope roared like fire in his chest. "Then let's show the consortium," he said. "What happens when the Forgotten stand together?" The storm lit with the fire of 100 ships joining the fight. The storm around the Perseid belt exploded with light. Consortium warships pressed their attack, but now they were no longer facing a broken refugee convoy and a lone human vessel. They were facing dozens of ships pouring out of hyperspace, vessels painted with symbols Jake had never seen, carrying species humanity had never met. On the New Horizons bridge, the crew stood frozen as the comms filled with overlapping voices. Alien captains, speaking in strange tones, were united by one message. They had heard humanity's defiance, and they had come to answer. Jake drew a long breath, then spoke into the open channel. "All vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Horizon. The consortium thinks they can break us. They think they can silence us. But together, we are more than they ever imagined. Fight with us. Fight for freedom. Fight for a galaxy that belongs to all of us." The response came not in words, but in action. The Zyorian ships, sharp and angular, darted through the dust like predators, firing beams that pierced consortium shields with surgical precision. The Drachmani warcruisers charged headlong, ramming enemy vessels with reckless abandon, their warrior cries echoing across the channels. The Free Mothers, telepathic coordination turned scattered ships into formations that moved as if guided by a single mind. For the first time in centuries, the consortium faced an enemy they couldn't intimidate, an enemy that fought not out of fear, but out of conviction. On the bridge of the lead consortium flagship, Ambassador Verisel's voice crackled across the open comms, fury barely restrained. Impossible, you are primitives, outcasts, criminals. You cannot stand against the might of the consortium. Jake snapped back without hesitation. Then watch us. The battle was chaos and brilliance. Human engineers had adapted Zelani energy conduits into the new horizon, letting its weapons fire longer, harder, faster. K-Thura harmonics fed into the targeting systems, predicting enemy movements. Vorthach's shielding absorbed blows that should have cracked them in half. Every shot fired, every maneuver executed, every desperate sacrifice told the consortium one truth: humanity was not alone anymore. But victory was not free. A Drachmani cruiser took a full barrage, shields failing. Its hull cracked open, spilling burning fragments into the storm. The survivors used their dying ship as a missile, plowing straight into a consortium destroyer and annihilating both. Their final war cry echoed in every channel until it was drowned by silence. The Zyorians lost 2 ships trying to protect a crippled Zelani freighter. The Free Mothers strained under the psychic weight of coordinating so many minds, some collapsing mid-battle. Even the New Horizon groaned with every hit, her hull blackened and trembling, her crew bloodied but unbroken. Ben Rodriguez wiped sweat and soot from his brow, shouting over the chaos. "We can't keep this up, Captain. For every ship we take down, they bring 5 more. Johnson's console blared. Confirmed additional consortium reinforcements dropping from hyperspace, at least another 50 ships inbound. Jake's chest tightened. 50 more, enough to drown them, enough to crush every spark of hope. And then the desperate thought came, unless hope spreads faster than fear. Hours later, the battered fleet limped to the edge of Frontier Station, the most remote human outpost, barely more than a mining hub with defenses meant to ward off pirates. It should have been nothing against a consortium armada. But something remarkable had happened on the way there. Word of the refugee stand had spread across human space and beyond. Communications relays were flooded with transmissions, messages of solidarity, volunteers begging to join the fight, whole communities offering supplies, ships, and lives. When Jake's convoy emerged from the dust clouds, Frontier Station was no longer alone. Dozens of human freighters had been hastily armed. Mining rigs had been converted into weapon platforms. Civilian transports were stacked with medics and engineers. It wasn't an army. It was something more dangerous. It was people who refused to bow. Admiral Susan Blake awaited them, her flagship Freedom gleaming above Frontier Station. She hailed Jake directly, her stern face softened by pride. "Captain Morrison, you've done the impossible. You've lit a fire across the colonies. Humanity, not backing down this time." Jake's voice cracked with exhaustion. "Admiral, we've bought time, but the consortium is coming with everything they've got. 50 warships, maybe more. They'll be here within hours." Blake nodded grimly. "Then we make our stand here, and not just us." Her image shifted, revealing not only human captains but alien faces: Zelani, Vorthach, K-Thura, and dozens more. The refugee fleets had pledged themselves to humanity's defense, and the new arrivals, species long scattered and enslaved, were swearing oaths of loyalty to this growing alliance. The galaxy was changing, right here, right now. The Battle of Frontier Station began with a roar. The consortium fleet arrived like a tidal wave, rows upon rows of warships, their weapons lighting the void in coordinated fury. They expected an easy slaughter. Instead, they found themselves met by a wall of fire. Human freighters armed with scavenged weapons, Vorthach-engineered shields protecting civilian transports, Zelani energy webs binding disparate ships into cohesive formations, K-Thura harmonics amplifying communication until fleets of different species moved as one. The first clash was devastating. The Freedom traded blows with a consortium dreadnought, its shields straining, but holding long enough for a cluster of refugee bombers to pierce through and shatter the enemy's reactor. The resulting explosion lit the battlefield, a sun born in defiance. The humans cheered, the consortium reeled. For the first time in history, their aura of invincibility cracked. Yet the price was staggering. Frontier Station itself took multiple direct hits, its outer hull shredded, fires raging across its habitat rings. Thousands died in the opening hour. Civilian ships fought with desperation but fell by the dozen. Whole refugee clusters were reduced to silence in the storm of plasma fire. Jake stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, his voice hoarse as he gave order after order, refusing to let despair win. His crew bled, his ship screamed, but his eyes burned with fire. Then Johnson's voice pierced through the chaos. "Captain, long-range scans, this isn't the main fleet. The Consortium's Supreme Armada is still gathering near their capital. This is only a probe, a test." The weight of it hit Jake like ice. They weren't even fighting the full fury yet. This slaughter was just the beginning. Ben's voice was low, haunted. "If this is only a test, we may not survive the real war." Jake gripped the railing so hard his knuckles whitened. He thought of the refugees, the children, the species that had answered their call. He thought of humanity's history, always outnumbered, always underestimated, always fighting anyway. He knew what he had to do. "Johnson," he ordered, "transmit a signal, broad spectrum, across every frequency, every language." She hesitated. "What do I tell them?" Jake's eyes locked on the raging battle where fire and hope mingled in equal measure. His voice was steady, unyielding. "Tell them resistance is possible. Tell them the Consortium can bleed. Tell them the galaxy doesn't have to kneel anymore." The signal went out, and somewhere across the vastness of space, a dozen hidden peoples heard it. Scattered fleets, enslaved colonies, secret exiles. The words carried like sparks on the wind, igniting hope in places the Consortium thought extinguished forever. Resistance was possible. The galaxy would never be the same. But even as the message spread, the battle raged on. The New Horizon rocked under another barrage, sparks showering the bridge. Alarms screamed. "Shields collapsing," Johnson shouted. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. Dr. Carter was thrown to the floor, blood streaking her face. Ben hauled her back up, shouting for medics. Jake fought to stay upright, the smoke choking his lungs. The New Horizon was dying. Frontier Station was burning, and the Consortium was still pressing harder. Then Johnson gasped, her voice strangled with horror. "Captain, new contacts inbound. Not 50 ships, not 100, hundreds. The main Consortium Armada is moving early." The screen filled with red icons, an ocean of warships blotting out the stars. Jake's chest went cold. This was no longer a battle. This was the beginning of a war. The battle at Frontier Station ended not with victory, but with survival. The Consortium fleet withdrew before dawn's cycle, leaving thousands dead, whole sections of the station gutted, and the space around it littered with wreckage. Yet humanity and its new allies still breathed. They had not been crushed. That in itself was victory enough to shake the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the half-ruined station, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Hollow screens flickered with casualty reports, each line another weight on his chest. Too many names, too many lost. And yet there was pride, too. They had stood against the most feared power in the galaxy and lived. Admiral Susan Blake joined him, her uniform scorched, one arm bandaged. "You bought us time, Captain, more than anyone expected, but the storm hasn't even begun." Jake's eyes shifted to the tactical display showing Consortium movements across the border. Red markers spread like wildfire. "How long until their main fleet arrives?" Blake's voice was grim. 3 weeks at most, and they're massing at every jump point. When they come, they'll bring fire enough to wipe us from the stars." The ultimatum came 3 days later. A transmission flooded every human channel, overriding civilian broadcasts, military comms, even personal networks. The face of Supreme Admiral Corvex filled the air, a being of cold authority, armored in steel and shadow, his voice like grinding stone. "People of humanity, you harbor fugitives from Consortium law. You defy galactic order. You encourage rebellion among lesser species. This will not stand." His eyes glowed with contempt. "You have 30 standard days to surrender the refugees. You will also submit your colonies to inspection to ensure no other enemies of peace hide among you. Fail, and humanity will face total correction." The transmission ended. Silence followed, heavier than any bombardment. Dr. Carter broke it first, her voice trembling with anger. "Total correction, that's what they call extermination." Ben Rodriguez slammed his fist on the table. "We should have expected it. The Consortium can't afford to let us defy them and survive, if others follow our example." Jake finished the thought quietly. "Their empire crumbles." President Helen Martinez convened the Colonial Council within hours. The emergency session was broadcast across human space. Jake and his officers watched from Frontier Station as governors, admirals, and scientists argued, their voices clashing like blades. Governor Henderson of Arcturus Prime was first, his face pale with fear. "We cannot fight them. We must surrender the refugees. If we resist, billions of human lives will be lost. Are we ready to sacrifice our entire species for aliens we barely know?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. But then Governor Maria Santos of New Terra rose, fire in her eyes. 3 months ago, these refugees arrived starving and broken. Today, they are our neighbors, our teachers, our friends. The Kathura have doubled our food production with their crystal gardens. The Zelani have given us clean energy systems that could make us independent within a year. The Vorthach have shared technologies the Consortium kept from us for centuries. Are we going to throw them away because tyrants threaten us? Or will we stand for something greater? The council erupted into shouting, split down the middle, fear against hope, safety against principle. Finally, President Martinez rose, silencing the chamber with her voice. "The Consortium wants us to betray our guests because they fear what we could become together. They want us to choose fear over compassion, submission over freedom. I say humanity chooses differently. We will not surrender them." The vote was called. 31 colonies voted to stand. 16 voted to submit. Humanity had chosen defiance. With the decision made, the work began. And for the first time in history, humans were not working alone. On Green Valley, the Kathura spread their crystal gardens across human farmlands, tripling yields while purifying soil. Starving colonies that had depended on Consortium imports now saw abundance. On Aquatica, Zelani engineers reshaped ocean currents, creating power systems that turned tides into endless energy. Whole colonies prepared to break free from Consortium fuel supplies. On Iron Ridge, Vorthach engineers worked with human machinists to build engines and shields unlike anything humanity had possessed before. Mining tools became railguns. Cargo haulers became war frigates. Civilian vessels became ships of defiance. Dr. Carter documented it all, her voice thick with awe. "This isn't just survival, it's transformation. The Consortium tried to break them, but by joining with us, they've given us tools we could never have imagined." Jake walked among the workshops of Iron Ridge, watching human welders and Vorthach smiths laugh together as they built weapons of war. He felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not despair. For the first time, he felt hope strong enough to burn away doubt. But hope was not without cost. Consortium trade embargoes bit deep. Medical supplies ran scarce. Colonies dependent on foreign components struggled to keep life support systems running. On some worlds, ration lines stretched for miles. Consortium propaganda flooded every channel, labeling humanity terrorists, criminals, anarchists. Neighboring species loyal to the Consortium turned their backs. Isolation pressed in like a noose tightening around humanity's throat. And still ships poured into human space, not to conquer but to join. Refugees from scattered worlds, exiles long thought extinct, rebels who had hidden in shadows for centuries. Each arrival brought stories of oppression and cruelty. Each arrival swelled the growing alliance. The galaxy, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to say no. Humanity had said it first. One night, as Jake stood at the observation deck of Frontier Station, Elder Morton joined him, his aquatic form resting in a water-filled chair. His voice was soft, like waves against the shore. "The ocean accepts all rivers, Captain. That is what we Zelani say. Humanity has become the ocean." Jake stared at the stars. "An ocean against a storm. Do you really believe we can win?" Morton's dark eyes gleamed. "The Consortium believes strength is numbers and weapons, but the ocean's strength is that it endures. Water wears down stone drop by drop. In time, it breaks even mountains." Jake wanted to believe. He had to believe. 2 weeks before the ultimatum expired, Consortium fleets began massing along human borders. Sensors showed hundreds of warships preparing for a final push. The pressure was suffocating. Then Dr. Carter rushed into the command center, her face alight with discovery. "Jake, you need to see this." She spread files across the holodable, data ripped from captured Consortium archives, decoded with Zelani algorithms. Jake's eyes scanned the information, his chest tightening. "Other refugees." Yes, Carter said breathlessly. Dozens of species scattered across the galaxy, enslaved, hunted, silenced. The consortium buried their existence, but they're out there, millions of beings waiting for someone to stand with them. Ben leaned closer, his eyes widening. If we reach them, if we unite them. Jake finished softly. We could change everything. But time was short. 3 days before the ultimatum expired, Supreme Admiral Corvex appeared again on every channel. His voice was thunder, his words final. Humanity has failed, you have not surrendered the criminals, you have not submitted. Now you will face correction. We come with fire, we come with silence. Prepare for extinction. And then the stars shifted. Long-range sensors lit up with an ocean of red. Consortium fleets, thousands strong, were on the move. Every jump point, every corridor into human space, they were coming. On the New Horizons bridge, silence fell as the scale of it sank in. Johnson's voice was a whisper. We're outnumbered 100-1. Ben's hand clenched into a fist. Then we fight 100-1. Jake stared at the display, his heart hammering. Around him, the crew waited for his order. Across human space, millions watched for humanity's answer. Across the galaxy, oppressed peoples prayed for proof that defiance was not a death sentence. Jake drew a steady breath. His voice was calm but filled with fire. Then we'll show them. Show them what happens when humanity and every species they tried to break choose to stand together. If they want a war. He gripped the railing so hard his knuckles went white. Then we'll give them one. The galaxy burned. Consortium fleets poured across every jump point, a tide of steel and fire. Entire constellations lit with battle as human colonies and refugee worlds fought to hold their ground. For centuries, the consortium had waged wars of conquest. This was different. This was annihilation. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unity, his new flagship, forged with technologies from every allied species. Its hull shimmered with Kathura-grown crystal plating, its reactors pulsed with Zelani currents, and its shields thrummed with Vorthach engineering. It was more than a human ship. It was a symbol of defiance. All ships reporting in, Johnson said, her voice tight but steady. 312 Allied vessels in formation, Zyorians on the left flank, Drachmani on the right, mothers coordinating comms across the fleet. Ben Rodriguez leaned over the tactical table, grim. And over 5,000 consortium warships arrayed against us. A silence fell. The numbers didn't just look bad, they looked impossible. Jake drew a slow breath. Then we'll remind them why impossible never stopped humanity. The first clash came at the border world of Iron Ridge. The consortium advanced in perfect lines, a machine of war refined over centuries. Their dreadnoughts fired in synchronized barrages, their fighters swarmed in mathematical precision. The Alliance answered with chaos. Ships of 100 designs fought side by side, traders turned into raiders, freighters into warships, mining rigs into battering rams. Consortium commanders sneered at the disorder. Then the disorder cut them to pieces. Kathura harmonics linked allied ships into a collective rhythm, allowing captains to anticipate each other's moves. Zelani power systems let vessels fire beyond expected limits, throwing off consortium predictions. Vorthach engineers had built weapons the consortium had forbidden, weapons that twisted gravity and tore through shields like paper. The result was a storm the consortium had never prepared for. Their formations broke. Their precision faltered. For the first time in memory, their war machines stumbled. But victory came with blood. The Zyorians fought like demons, darting between dreadnoughts, but half their fleet was lost in the opening hours. Drachmani war cruisers rammed enemy lines, leaving trails of wreckage but vanishing in fire. The mothers, telepaths stretched thin, screamed under the psychic strain of coordinating thousands of minds. And humanity bled with them. Dozens of converted freighters were vaporized. Colonies were bombarded into glass. Civilians who had never held a weapon died buying time for others to flee. On the Unity, Jake watched the losses scroll past, each name a dagger. His crew was silent, eyes hollow, but hands never stopping. They all knew the stakes. They all knew the price. By the second week, the consortium changed tactics. If they could not crush the Alliance in space, they would terrorize them on the ground. They targeted Green Valley, humanity's breadbasket, and the first home of the Kathura refugees. Orbital bombardments scorched the fields where crystal gardens grew. Firestorms devoured entire harvests. Millions would starve if the crops failed. Jake responded with fury. The Unity led a desperate strike, plunging into enemy formations. Allied ships followed in reckless defiance, carving a corridor through consortium lines. Engineers risked their lives patching shields mid-battle. Pilots flew until their hands bled. Soldiers fought with knives when their guns ran dry. When the dust cleared, Green Valley still stood, scorched, bleeding but alive. The Alliance had saved it barely. At Aquatica, the Zelani ocean world, the consortium unleashed a new horror. Deep penetration torpedoes designed to boil seas and kill aquatic species where they lived. For hours, the oceans burned. Millions of Zelani screamed as their waters turned to steam. But humanity adapted. Human submarines, repurposed with Vorthat shields, plunged into the boiling depths, intercepting torpedoes with suicidal courage. Entire crews drowned saving strangers. Zelani survivors wept in gratitude, their songs carrying across the fleet. At Iron Ridge, the Vorthach workshops became targets. Consortium strike teams landed on the surface, slaughtering engineers and torching factories. Human soldiers fought street by street alongside Vorthach defenders, their rifles jamming from the heat, their armor cracked, but their resolve unbroken. For every block lost, another was reclaimed with blood. The war was no longer ships and battles, it was survival itself. On the Unity, Jake stood in the war room surrounded by his officers and alien allies. Maps of fire stretched across the galaxy, each glowing red with consortium pressure. Elder Morton floated in his water chair, his voice calm but heavy. "The ocean is vast, Captain, but even the ocean can be poisoned." Hive speaker Zach H's antennae twitched with tension. "Our hive sings defiance, but the song grows thin." Chief Engineer Jexar's mechanical voice ground low. "Our weapons burn hot, too hot. If we cannot resupply soon, our ships will fail." Jake listened, his chest aching. They were winning battles, yes, but at a cost that could not be sustained. Every day, the Alliance grew stronger in spirit, weaker in numbers, and the consortium had not yet committed their full strength. That truth gnawed at him. Then Dr. Carter burst in, eyes blazing with urgency. "Jake, we've decoded more from the consortium archives. You need to see this." She spread data across the holodable. Dozens of species appeared in holographic form, species humanity had never met. Each marked with the same designation: suppressed, scattered, erased. "The consortium has done this for centuries," Carter said, her voice trembling with fury. "Any species that innovated, resisted, or refused obedience, they crushed. But survivors are out there, millions of them, waiting." Ben frowned. "Even if we reached them, it would take years to gather them." "No," Carter said fiercely. "Not years. If we use the Zelani currents, K-Thura crystal relays, and mother telepaths together, we can send a message across the galaxy. Not a military order, a call, a promise. That resistance is possible, that they are not alone." Jake stared at the holograms, scattered faces, lost peoples, forgotten voices, the same desperation he'd seen in the first refugee fleet. His voice was quiet but steady. "Then we'll call them, all of them." The plan was insane. The Zelani warned the energy surge could burn out entire systems. The mothers feared the psychic strain would kill dozens of their own. The K-Thura hive whispered that the crystal resonance could shatter. But the choice was clear. Either they fought alone and died, or they reached for the galaxy and gambled everything. Jake stood before the Allied fleet, his voice broadcast across every channel. "We're outnumbered, outgunned. The consortium believes that's enough. They believe fear will keep us divided, but fear is a lie. We are proof, humans, refugees, outcasts. We've stood together and fought them to a standstill. If you can hear my voice, wherever you are, whatever they've done to you, know this: the consortium can bleed. Resistance is possible. Join us, fight with us, and together we will break their chains." The message roared across the stars, carried on waves of energy, crystal, and thought. It burned circuits, shattered crystals, broke minds, but it went. It went everywhere. For days, silence answered. Then one by one, new signals appeared. A fleet of Zorans, their AI minds hidden for centuries, now unleashed. The telepathic mothers, rising in rebellion on 3 worlds at once. The Drakmani exile clans, warriors long thought extinct, burning through consortium space with fire and blood. The galaxy was awakening. Jake felt it in his bones. The war was no longer just humanity's, it was everyone's. But the consortium was not idle. On the edge of human space, Supreme Admiral Corvex himself arrived with the heart of the Armada, 10,000 warships, more firepower than any alliance could dream of. His voice filled every channel, dripping with rage. You have gathered the filth of the galaxy under your banner. You think unity makes you strong, but unity means nothing before annihilation. Today, humanity will learn its place. Today, your alliance dies. The fleet of 10,000 moved forward, blotting out the stars. On the Unity, the crew stared at the display, pale and silent. Even Ben, always defiant, whispered, "We can't fight that, not even with everyone." Jake's heart pounded. He thought of every refugee child, every human farmer, every exile who had answered their call. He thought of history, of Earth's long tradition of standing against impossible odds. And he spoke, not just to his crew, but to every ship in the Alliance. Then today, we don't fight for victory. We fight to show the galaxy what we are. We fight so no one will ever kneel again. The stars lit with fire as the largest battle in galactic history began. And in the opening hour, 3 Allied fleets were annihilated. The stars were fire. The Alliance fleet and the Consortium Armada clashed in a storm of light and death unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 warships surged forward under Supreme Admiral Corvex's command, their precision barrages shaking space itself. Against them, barely a few hundred human and refugee vessels, outnumbered, outgunned, fragile. But fragile things can cut deepest when they refuse to break. The Unity dove through enemy fire, its K-Thura-grown crystal armor glowing from the heat. Jake stood firm on the bridge, sweat streaking his face, his voice carrying above the roar. Left flank push with the Drachmani. Mothers keep comms open, everyone else. Hit their dreadnought line, don't let them box us in. The Alliance fought like no one had before. Ships of 100 designs moved as one organism, linked by K-Thura harmonics, Zelani power currents, and mother telepathy. Consortium formations collapsed under the chaos. Dreadnoughts that had ruled for centuries reeled from weapons they had outlawed, innovations they had forbidden. The battle raged for hours, whole fleets vanished in fire, Consortium vessels shattered, Alliance ships burned. There was no safe ground, no retreat, only survival moment by moment. Then came the breaking point. A massive Consortium superdreadnought, the Iron Dominion, plowed through the Allied center, cutting ships apart with its planet-killer cannons. Refugee clusters disintegrated under its fire. Human freighters vaporized in seconds. The battle was about to collapse. Johnson screamed, "We can't stop it, its shields are absorbing everything." But Elder Morton's voice came across the channel, calm and sorrowful. "Then we must give the ocean a new current." Jake's eyes widened. Morton, no. But the Zelani had already made their choice. Their entire flotilla surged forward, linking their energy cores into a single unstable resonance. Blue light swelled until the sea itself seemed to rise from the void. Then, with a collective cry, the Zelani detonated their own fleet in a wave of energy. The shockwave tore through the Iron Dominion, shredding its shields, splitting its hull. The dreadnought disintegrated in fire. The bridge of the Unity went silent. Johnson's eyes filled with tears. They gave everything. Jake's chest ached, but his jaw hardened. Then we make sure it wasn't in vain, press the attack. The tide shifted again. Allied ships surged with renewed fury. The Consortium faltered. But Corvex's armada was vast. For every enemy ship destroyed, a dozen more advanced. The Alliance was bleeding out. Dr. Carter stumbled onto the bridge, her hands clutching a datapad, her eyes wide with urgency. "Jake, we've found something. In the archives, buried deep. The Consortium's entire command structure runs through a single nexus at their capital system. If we take it, we don't just win this battle, we shatter their empire." Ben frowned. "Their capital, that's suicide. It's the most fortified system in the galaxy." Jake looked around at his crew, at the faces of those who had followed him through fire and loss. Then he spoke. "Then that's where we go, not for victory, for the future." Word spread quickly. The Alliance rallied, battered but unbroken. The decision was unanimous: take the fight to the Consortium capital, not to conquer but to liberate, not to burn but to end the cycle of fear. The fleet limped into hyperspace, scarred and diminished, but burning with a fire that no bombardment could extinguish. Across the galaxy, more ships answered the call. Forgotten peoples, hidden exiles, long-silenced voices, all rising. By the time the Alliance reached the capital, nearly 1,000 ships flew under its banner. Still far fewer than the Consortium's defenses, but enough to try. The battle for the Consortium capital was not like any before. The system lit with a storm of fire. Consortium defenses unleashed everything: dreadnoughts, automated fortresses, fleets of fighters. But the Alliance came not as an army, but as a tide. Ships darted in unpredictable patterns, linked mines guiding maneuvers no computer could predict. Human engineers jury-rigged weapons mid-battle. Refugee pilots turned desperation into genius. The Unity led the charge straight toward the Nexus, a massive station at the heart of the system, pulsing with energy, the mind of the Empire itself. Supreme Admiral Corvex's voice thundered across every channel. "You are insects before the storm. You are nothing against 1,000 years of order." Jake answered, his voice calm, steady, defiant. "Maybe, but you made one mistake, Admiral. You cast out the different. We took them in, and now the galaxy fights as one." The Unity plunged into the Nexus's defense line, shields flaring, weapons blazing. Allied fleets followed, ramming, firing, sacrificing. One by one, ships broke through, carving a path with their lives. Inside the Nexus, chaos reigned. Systems overloaded from the strain of coordinating so many fleets against so many new tactics. The Consortium's own rigidity became its weakness. Dr. Carter screamed over the comms, "Now Jake, hit the core." Jake's hands tightened on the railing. "All ships concentrate fire on the Nexus." The void lit with every weapon the Alliance possessed. Crystals, plasma, railguns, energy beams, all hammering the same point. The Nexus screamed, its defenses failing, its heart cracking. Then, with a blinding flash, the Consortium's central command imploded. Every warship in the system faltered. Some fled, some surrendered, some simply shut down, their orders cut off forever. The battle was over. The Consortium, the empire that had ruled through fear for 1,000 years, was broken. The aftermath was chaos, but it was a new chaos. On Earth, President Martinez stood before the New Haven Council, 53 species represented, each once scattered, now united. "Today we end an empire built on chains. Today we begin a community built on trust. The galaxy is wide. There will be mistakes. There will be conflict, but together we are stronger than fear." Jake watched from the back of the chamber, his uniform scorched, his body weary. He thought of Elder Morton's sacrifice, of the Zelani's song, of every name lost at Frontier Station. He thought of the refugees who had arrived broken, now helping rebuild worlds with hope. Dr. Carter stood beside him, her voice soft. "You realize what you've done? You didn't just save them, you changed everything." Jake shook his head. "Not me, all of us." 5 years later, Jake walked through the gardens of New Geneva, the new capital of the Haven Alliance. Human children laughed with Kathura youth, growing crystal sculptures that sparkled in the sunlight. Zelani swam in the rivers, teaching humans to breathe underwater with new biotech. Vorthach inventors built toys that seemed to defy physics, delighting every child who touched them. The galaxy was no longer divided by fear. It was becoming something new, something alive. Dr. Carter joined him, smiling as she handed him a datapad. "Explorers just returned from Andromeda. They've found signs of intelligent life in 3 systems. The Council wants to know if you'll lead first contact." Jake looked up at the stars, the same stars where he had once found nothing but emptiness. Now they were filled with voices, filled with possibility. "Are they refugees?" he asked quietly. Carter laughed. "We don't know yet, but if they are." Jake smiled, a tired, hopeful smile. "Then we'll bring them home. That's what families do." Above them, the spaceport thrummed with ships of every shape and size. No longer enemies, now neighbors, builders, friends. The galaxy had cast out its different ones. Humanity had taken them in. Together, they had created something the Consortium had never understood. Not an empire, not an army. A family. And families, Jake knew, would fight for each other until the stars themselves burned out.